new members to our Dolphin family. A couple things I'd like to start off with. Number one, if you are watching the screen, if you could mute yourself so that way we don't get conflicting audio going on for others. And also, if you want, at some point, you can go to speaker screen, so that way it's only the speaker showing up. Once we start with the presentation, it may be easier to follow that way. My name is Steve Evans. I'm the Associate Athletic Director here at Moyne. I've been at Moyne for, this is going on my 21st year. So on behalf of the athletic department, I want to welcome all of you. We're excited to have your sons, your daughters joining our family at Moyne, and we're looking forward to the year ahead. As much as it's been a struggle and there have been challenges, we appreciate the fact that you've hung with us, that you've been flexible, that you've been able to cooperate with everything that we've been able to do to hopefully get our students back on campus and get things going in a positive direction as we start the school year. I want to kind of frame up tonight's meeting. Our Inside the L culture has been going on for over 10 years now when it started. And we've started our Inside the L orientation for parents normally during our parent orientation when you drop your sons and daughters off. Due to everything this year, we've decided to push it back and do it in this format. So hopefully you'll get something out of it. You'll have a better understanding of what Inside the L is and how we're going about proceeding in athletics during the 4 years that your son or daughter is a student athlete. And we are not doing this meeting in any way for COVID-19 information. All of that information will be passed down through our coaches, and our coaches will be able to relay it to the student athletes. If there is a need at some point in the future to do a type of panel that can help answer some questions, that's something we can explore in the future. I want to also take this opportunity to thank many of you. One of the hats I wear at Moyne is fundraising for athletics. Right now, we're currently in the process of getting ready for our 40th annual Gold Wave Golf Tournament. Many of our teams are taking advantage of the whole sponsorship opportunity to raise money for their programs. Many parents are looking for ways to get involved. That is one way you can be involved. Try to raise money for your son or daughter's team. Another way, if you were to make any type of donation to the annual appeal, you can do that online. With the annual appeal, the first $25 goes to the general fund, and the remaining money goes to your son's or daughter program or to whatever you specify. One of the things we do with our general fund money is pay for our Inside the L programming. So hopefully you'll have a better understanding of that tonight. You'll learn everything that we do. And if you have any questions, I would wait probably till about 30 minutes into this presentation. If you want to type some of the questions you may have in the chat box, I will do my best at the end to have our speaker tonight answer some of those questions for you. If we can't, if we don't have time, we'll try to follow up and do that at a later date. Our goal is to be in and out of here before 7:45. So we appreciate your attention tonight. We hope you hang with us. We hope you learned something and hope you're excited about everything we are at Moyne. Without further ado, I'd like to first, this is being recorded. So if in the end you have to jump off, or if you like the content and you want to know about it more, it'll probably be up on our website before the end of the week for you to look at again. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce a partner of ours with the Excellence with Integrity Institute, Mr. Matt Davidson. Matt.
Thank you, Coach. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. We're coming to you from our socially distanced setup here, where we've set up all of our recording and able to do the orientation tonight that we usually do in the Performing Arts Center on the campus of Moyne. So tonight we come to you with a chance to dig in a little bit more deeply on the Inside the L. I've been working with college athletics and student athletes for a very, very long time and have done the orientation for a number of years. I can tell you it's a little bit different for me this year, having dropped my own daughter off at college last Sunday or last Saturday and getting her settled in. So with a week under your belt, hopefully your son or daughter is settling in and figuring out life. Tonight will give us a chance to talk to you a little bit about what we call Inside the L. A little bit about our institute. We're a 501c3 nonprofit located here in upstate New York. We do culture and organizational development with a number of organizations in education, workplace, and athletics environments. In particular, we do a lot of work with college athletics at the Division I, II, and III level. And so it's my privilege to live close to Moyne and be here in the community and to get to partner with Moyne Athletics. I travel around and see a lot of different places, and this is sort of my home court to come back to Moyne and to really be working on the culture development. In about 2008, the Board of Trustees at Moyne was reflecting on athletics, and it put forth a little bit of an audacious goal. The goal was to become a nationally premier Division II athletic department in the Jesuit tradition. Each word in there had something that was really challenging. Nationally premier, not just locally. What does it mean to be nationally premier? An athletic department. Not simply a flagship program, but across the board competitive excellence in the Jesuit tradition, meaning that the Jesuit part was instrumental to all of the other pieces going on in athletics. The internal conversations began within athletics shortly thereafter. And around 2011, I entered the scene and began having conversations with various stakeholders about the current and desired state of their quest for this. The way I would describe Inside the L is a shared culture based on the most fundamental Jesuit ideals, translated into the highest aspirational goals of intercollegiate athletic participation. It is a shared culture. It is going after the Jesuit foundations, and it is aspiring for the best and most complete vision of athletics. You will find places where they just do the sports piece. You will find places where they're extraordinary at academics and don't do as well at the athletics. You will find places where they do whole person development. Moyne was aspiring to do all of these things together in and through the athletic experience. About 5 years after we really began in earnest putting this into action, I was privileged to go with then Athletics Director Matt Bassett to the first summit called Sport at the Service of Humanity, sponsored by the Vatican. It was really an extraordinary opportunity for Moyne to be showcased as really one among many, many high-profile organizations and really one of the only intercollegiate athletic programs represented there. The last 5 years for Moyne Athletics since the Sport at the Service of Humanity conference has really seen unparalleled success, athletic, academic, and in terms of the Jesuit ideals. These were just some of the examples of excellence that we had from the last full year where we weren't interrupted, so to speak. If you think about 71% of Moyne student athletes being named to the NE10 academic honor roll, 24 academic all-conference selections, 7 programs competing in the NCAA championships, the competitive excellence, the across-the-board piece that you see in these goals and these accomplishments is really extraordinary. As an outsider, it's a little bit easier for me to brag up on Moyne because I can tell you that not everybody that we work with sees these accomplishments. But it's really, really important that people know at the outset that this isn't just the soft, warm, fuzzy culture stuff. This is culture as the pathway to the kind of competitive excellence that we're looking for across the board. Well, how do we go about doing that? How do we get these accomplishments through the culture? First thing we do and we work on are these 5 bedrock Jesuit values. Sometimes I think about what we do as mining for energy. When you get down and you look at these bedrock values, these are values that have been part of a 500-year-old organizations. Things like magis, defined as a restless desire for excellence rooted in gratitude. Cura personalis. Now, maybe this is the first time you're hearing these terms. Maybe you heard them a little bit on your tour. Men and women for others. The idea of finding God in all things. And a commitment to social justice. These are Jesuit values that we were looking at the outset, and not just saying, why are these important, but why are these important to us today, right now, and to athletics? We took those 5 Jesuit core values, the bedrock values, and we translated them through a process, through a dialogue where coaches and administrators and staff were looking at the idea of Magis and saying, what does it mean? How would we translate in layman's terms for our department what Magis means? Excellence with integrity. There are many different definitions of cura personalis, but what we talked about was tough love and total care of each person, mind, body, and spirit. In each one of these words, you see the kind of battle that we were going after to define the most important things. It wasn't just unconditional love, but tough love and total care. When you put those things together, you get something that is unique, challenging, difficult, not easy to come by. So we took those values and translated them down into the touchstone. Now today you can see this touchstone in the athletic center. You can see it on t-shirts, you can see it around. But it's very, very important to know that at the foundations of Inside the L, these words, these values were translated by our community, by our coaches, by our staff members, working together to say, what's it look and sound and feel like? We took those values and then we also integrated them into our 25 years of grounded theory about human development. When you look at the idea of excellence, integrity, teamwork, self-work, those are our layman's translation. On the right-hand side, I think you look and you see an idea like Magis. A good simple translation for Magis is excellence, cura personalis, integrity, integros, wholeness, self-work, inner work. What Jesuit education is often talked about as action and reflection. Teamwork, basically men and women for others, a sense of justice. In our work, what we have found is it's these 4 things, individually strong, but balanced together. The stronger your quest for excellence, the more important it is that you have a balance of integrity. The stronger your quest for excellence, that needs to be both at the team level as well as at the self level. So in the Inside the L culture, we're trying to translate our vision down to human development and culture development work. One of the most important pieces of the Inside the L approach is the idea of culture. This little map here gives you an idea of what we're trying to do in Inside the L. At the end goal, what we're really looking for is performance. Student athletes who are strong now, but also strong in life. We want those Jesuit values to be part and parcel of who they are. Character, a rough definition, is values in action. But the question that we have to ask ourselves is how and where do we get our character? And in our lingo, what we would say is culture shapes character. It is our collective habits that shape our individual habits. If you're part of a team that works hard, gives and receives constructive criticism, is kind to each other, as you're part of that group, those become part of your individual habit. People who coach or recruit or hire for a living know that you can hire for character and talent. But that character and talent can indeed be corrupted in a culture. You got a good, strong, tough person who's motivated. Put them in a culture that's fat, dumb, happy, lazy, cynical. Pretty soon that becomes corrupted. So who shapes that culture? Leaders do. Whether we're talking about our captains or whether we're talking about our coaches, this is what we're trying to go after Inside the L. Leader shaping culture, culture shaping character, character leading to that optimal performance. But the important thing is that we are moving the culture by indeed working on everybody collectively. Inside the L is not simply knowledge about what the Jesuit values are. We're not giving you a test at the end of it to say, do you know what Magis means? How would you define it? What are the 3 definitions? This is the difference between knowledge about versus the experience of. Just like athletics, we want to work out those muscles. And over the course of our time together, we've developed numerous and varied kinds of practice whereby we put Inside the L in practice. Some of those practices are delivered to the entire group. Those are what we call universal strategies. the Sunday playbook, which you'll see, members of our community reflecting out once a week on what our values mean, what's going on, how we're living this stuff out. We've historically had our whole department meetings where everyone in the department is together for at least 1 hour each semester, where we're breaking down our theme, talking, building community, hearing from our stakeholders. Then we have targeted programming. This is part of what we'll be doing in the next couple of weeks with our cohort meetings. We push in for programming that just goes to freshmen, just to sophomores, just to seniors. We're trying to really target particular groups and their particular needs. And then finally, we really want to be able to deliver programming that is needed in an intense format. One thing I will say to you as a parent looking from the outside in that I love about Moyne and Moyne athletics is that if your son or daughter is in the red, if they're struggling, whatever that might be, there is a place, there is a person for that intensive work. But because we're trying to work on the entire culture, the entire cohort, the entire department, the likelihood that it gets to that intense program becomes less. One thing that we've added this year I want to talk a little bit about is what we're calling leadership essentials. We know that this is going to be a non-traditional year for all kinds of program delivery. And what we did over the course of the summer was to work together around 8 or 9 preliminary workouts. These are workouts around important things that are needed for the world we're living in right now for student athletes and coaches. We're talking about developing a growth mindset. We're talking about anxieties and fear. We're talking about rediscovering our drive. And what we're doing in these materials is not doing a graduate course on the topic, but giving the essential information needed so that student athletes and coaches can reflect on themselves and then begin a dialogue with their teammates. There are a lot of things, unfortunately, that we cannot do right now in athletics, but there has never been more need or a better time for us to work on things inside of ourselves and things within our team. Now, one important piece about the leadership essentials that speaks to something that is unique at Moyne. Inside the L is not compliance. It's not something that they bring us in to do with student athletes. In fact, it's whole department, whole person development that begins with coaches and administrators. Leadership essentials and the way that we're rolling out, once a week on a Tuesday, coaches and staff will get together with us and we'll do a workout where we're working on each one of those modules ourselves, talking about it ourselves. What do we find value in? What are we challenged by? Seeking best practices from one another. Then in the following week, then it's up to coaches to adopt, introduce this to their own team. So again and again, we're trying to make this something that we do for and with student athletes so that there's authenticity to it. It's not something that we're just making them do, requiring them to do. We're really trying to embed it within the overall culture. One thing that we're constantly trying to do is to make sure that culture that we're working on occurs at the intersection between what we call the urgent and the important. When we're doing our culture work, we're not just talking about nice, warm, fuzzy, soft values that are good and important and nice. We're trying to find out how those values intersect with the most urgent and important things that are affecting us in athletics today. When we look at the COVID-19 response, individually and collectively, when we look at what's going on in terms of social justice, when we look at what is happening and the challenges of mental health, we see these as urgently impacting our culture. We also feel like our culture has something to say to each of these things. The programming that we're talking to you about, we didn't create because COVID-19 happened, because there was stuff going on with social justice in the world that is unfolded this summer. These were things that we were thinking and talking about and the important values of who we are every single day, but they become critically important, pertinent, valuable, especially now in this time period. Let me give you an example. This is where we were talking about the value men and women for others. And in our conversations at the outset of our programming, we were asking coaches, what's this look and sound and feel like? What would you want to see an athlete do? Sounds lofty to say men and women for others. How very Jesuit. What does it actually look and sound and feel like? We talked about things like being willing to put the needs and goals of the team first, being willing to hold the self and others accountable, supporting teammates in times of desolation. If you think about those indicators, they're important. But if you think about them in terms of how we're going to respond to COVID-19, what we need to do to keep each other safe, these are directly relevant and important. Same thing, probably one of the values we get the most questions about, the most interest in is, how do you do something very Jesuit like finding God in all things? The Jesuits talk about ad majorem Dei gloriam, for the greater glory of God. Well, what's that look and sound and feel like in an athletic setting? When we are talking about things like seeking out the beautiful, the positive, and the good, each day and in each situation. This is something that we think athletes really have a unique chance to do in any year, but especially this year. Maybe you're not playing as much as you once did. Maybe you've got an injury. Maybe you're having some conflicts with your teammates. Can you still find the good, the beautiful? Can you reframe challenges as opportunities? Really, really important, but particularly important this year for sure. And then social justice. When we think about this idea of what's unfolding in our country, there's an important conversation to be had. And what we've been talking about for a very long time around Inside the L is showing a willingness to speak up, to stand up, to step out for what's right, to intervene and be the change. A sense of justice means giving other people their due. One of the primary ways you're going to learn about this in the world is if this is something that you practice and exercise within your team. It's not even easy within a small team. It's not easy when a team is homogeneous. Everybody's the same. There are still times when you look and go, I don't want to give that person their due. So we take these indicators, and what we're really trying to say is we know they're important. How is it important for today, tonight, this year, this time period that we're in? When people hear about our culture and values and the work that we're doing, sometimes they think about this as warm, fuzzy stuff that you can't measure. One of the things that I would say that has transformed the most within our work is the degree to which we're able to measure these values as culture assets. Now remember, we're measuring and developing culture. So there's a difference between asking people, Matt, are you honest? Are you kind? Are you hardworking? Are you a person who has a sense of justice? Usually what happens is when you ask somebody their individual response, they know what the right answer is. And so the data are usually high and flat. What we do is we're asking people, think about the individuals on this team. How well do we do these things? What you see in this panel of data where blue is student athletes over 2 years and the tan is the coaches, this is what makes us believe that this is actually something you can measure. These are student athletes on a team who are saying, you know what? I don't think we do a very good job caring for each other. We think it's going to be high. We think it's going to be flat. We have seen national championship caliber teams that saw in their culture data, we don't like each other very much. We got some dry rot that's underneath the surface that we can begin to work on and to develop. So in our assessment, what we're trying to do is to find ways to measure and develop our culture and our values. Now, as we go into the practicalities of implementing this, we take our big mission, we take the Inside the L touchstone, and what we try to do is each year we've given it a theme, an annual theme that we rotate through. The thinking on this is that we want to keep it fresh. We don't want to begin every year starting with the top line of our Inside the L touchstone. So we take 4 other Jesuit ideas and we sort of squeeze our touchstone to see if we can get some more light from it. This year's theme is Be the Change. And I would argue by grace, you can't have a better theme to really frame up what we're talking about. We take those themes and what we're trying to do is to think about strength and conditioning for culture. All right, we're looking at what are the muscles needed for this particular year. What are the muscles that we can develop to make our student athletes ready, not simply to survive the year that's ahead, but to thrive with it? So we'll unpack this a little bit to just give you an idea of how we try to render this relevant. We take this big idea from our touchstone, transformational love, a love that changes, and a commitment to be the change. And when we're talking to student athletes over the course of this year, we're trying to look at it three different ways. First of all, we're trying to emphasize you be the change. We're starting with the intrapersonal development. Before you can change somebody else, you really got to begin to look at yourself. Second, we're talking about being the change in your world, meaning your team, your classrooms, your dorm, the sphere that you operate within. And then finally, we're trying to get them to think about being the change in the world. And if you think about this sort of playdown, developmental playdown, first we're thinking and working about myself. Then I'm working on the team that I'm comfortable with. Then I'm starting to really think about what would it mean to take this seriously in the world. You be the change. What are the kinds of things that we're going to try to unpack in this for your son or daughter, for our student athletes? One of the things that we see with student athletes is perfectionism. A sense that in the past, being perfect was something that maybe got them where they are now. But they bring an all or nothing, first or last, outcome only perspective that often causes them a great deal of pain, a great deal of anxiety, a great deal of worry and fear. This is a year where valuing the process is going to be very, very important. You may not have the game, the scoreboard, some of the things that you traditionally look at to say, how am I doing? Now is the time where the journey, the commitment to the process is what we want them to begin thinking about. Avoiding isolation. St. Ignatius said, in times of desolation, avoid isolation. We're trying to get them to think about themselves, but we don't want them to do it in a vacuum. Many of the approaches that you see today around mental health, around any kind of skills or leadership development is really quite isolating. You do your work by yourself online. What we're talking about is busting beyond that so that in sharing it with your teammates and coaches, there's a kind of solidarity. There's a kind of harmony that comes from realizing you're not the only person who's anxious, who's nervous, who's upset. And then finally, we really want to emphasize this care of the mind, body, and soul. Our student athletes think about mind and body, but that heart piece, the soul, they are grieving. In our coaching conversation the other day, one of our coaches said, I don't think we estimate or fully understand just the grief, the loss of playing, the loss of the sport, the loss of lots of things. We want to go back and have that heart spot where they are thinking about working on themselves, but also doing it in a way that they're sharing with their teammates. And all the work that we do as we're trying to drive this forward, we're drawing upon current social science, different kinds of mind, body, spirit work to inform this so that they're getting an advanced education on optimal performance. And they may be familiar with, the latest workouts and the weight room and the physical aspects of training. But in our experience with Division 1, 2, and 3 athletic departments, and our experience with some of the very, very best programs in the country, we have unlimited resources. One thing we're finding is that there's a lot of work that can still be done in terms of strength and conditioning for mind, body, spirit at the individual and collective level. When we're thinking about be the change in your world, your team, your dorm, the environments that you're in, we're trying to push the bounds because we know from our data at Moyne and with other college athletic teams, one of the things that young people really struggle with is interpersonal challenges. They want to do their own thing. They want to take the big shot. They want to work hard on their sport, but they do not like having difficult conversations. This is true about simple sport-related things. Hey, I don't think you're working very hard on your game. Hey, I think you need to do a better job hitting me when I'm open. It's particularly difficult if we start thinking about talking about things like race, justice, challenges within our team dynamic. So having the commitment to begin really thinking about how do we work together as a team is something that we're trying to go after in their world. Why? Little muscles build up to big muscles. If they can learn to have hard conversations, difficult conversations within a team, within a group of 15 to 30, they can have a muscle that might allow them to be ready to have bigger conversations at the community level, at the national level, at the big policy level, which is what we're ultimately hoping they'll be able to do. Simplest definition of God comes from Gospel of John, God is love. St. Ignatius beautifully said, love exists in communication, which is probably why it's so darn hard for us to get it right. Bell Hooks, the social justice author, said, without justice, there can be no love. If we're thinking about why it's so darn hard to have hard conversations, to get it right with people in small groups, I think this speaks to it. And this is where we're trying to use the sport experience to prepare them to be better in and through their sport for the things that wait in the world. And then finally, when we think about being the change in the world, this year, we're really trying to double down on the Jesuit commitment to social awareness, social responsibility, and social justice. We're wanting them to engage in the conversation that's going on in this country, around the world, about justice. As St. Ignatius said, we want them to be prepared to go forth and set the world on fire. So we want to have some of those big change the world conversations. And yet in our experience, what we found is if you go too quickly to that, you really make it very, very difficult for student athletes to engage. What we try to do is go through what they know, themselves, their team, their coaches, and then begin to challenge them to think about the world and how their athletic experience has prepared them to go forth and indeed set the world on fire. The way we think about what we do is strength and conditioning for culture. 25 years ago, actually a little bit longer than that, around 1970, was the first paid strength and conditioning coach in intercollegiate athletics at the University of Nebraska. Prior to that, there were all kinds of myths, it'll make you slow, it'll make you inflexible. Once there was one strength and conditioning coach, all of a sudden, everybody started to realize, wait a minute, there's strength and conditioning needed for basketball, for volleyball, for football. There's strength and conditioning needed in the preseason. That's different than this. In the same way as we think about culture, in any year, for any team, there is culture needed for and developed from the situations that we're involved in. And that's the way we approach this year. If you were to ask, what are we trying to do as a department, the way we've been framing it up and kicking it around is winning the wait. We don't want to just survive the wait to get through the COVID to where things go back to normal. We want to thrive. We want to win. Our focus is on winning that wait, doing everything we possibly can within the time that we've got to make ourselves better. We want to resist emerging softer, more selfish, smaller, divided, distracted, fragile, fearful. If we're not careful, all of us can come out of something like this experience weaker, worse for it. What we're going to try to do is use these unprecedented times to grow, develop, learn, strengthen, improve, individually and collectively. We think it will make them better students, better athletes, better for the world. Now, in the short term, what we have to do is sort of persuade them, look, this stuff that we're working on will indeed make you a better student, a better athlete. You're going to win more. You're going to be stronger. You're going to be ready to thrive on the other side. But our hope is that as they go from what they know to what we want for them, that eventually they're going to look and say, not in spite of, but maybe because of these difficult circumstances and the culture that we've developed, they're more prepared than anybody has been before. What's your job as parents? How would I look at this? I would continue to think about your role as another kind of strength and conditioning coach. I think your job is to help your student athlete to expect adversity. Every year there's adversity for freshmen, this year in particular. what we want to think about is you helping us to help them use every kind of adversity they might experience this year as a form of development. Can they use it as a way to get better in mind, body, and spirit? Help us to help them focus on growth. What we often talk about is fail fast, evolve quickly. If your son or daughter is trying something that isn't working, keep reminding them, stop before it's too late. Fail fast, get a new strategy, avoid isolation, reach out. We want you to make sure as parents that you walk that line of not panicking. You know, if we were in the weight room and every time my muscle shook a little bit or wobbled, or I was hurting a little bit, if you took it off, you wouldn't be a very good strength and conditioning coach. We want you to hold it on there. Look, I think you need to talk to coach. I think you need to talk to your teammates. I think you need to reach out to your professor. However, in those times of extreme danger or desolation, you sense that something really isn't right, that's where we want you to reach out as soon as possible. That's where there is no place, in my opinion, equal to or better than Moyne. When you need the help, they're there. So find that fine line between working out the muscles of your sons and daughters and then also making sure that you're there to ensure their safety. The two big questions every year that we challenge incoming and current students with are these. What's in it for me? We think it's fair that they should ask the question, what's in it for me? What do I get from this? And what we know is we are achieving unprecedented academic, athletic, and whole person development success. So what's in it for them is more wins, more A's, more sense of peace, engagement, presence from it. But we also want to make sure that they understand and ask themselves the second question, what's in me for it? Our culture needs them. Our department needs them. Their teammates need them. They have to challenge themselves to get out in front of this and make sure that they're not simply waiting for something to be dropped on their lap. There is no question about it. This is an approach where you get back what you give into it. There's a spiritual adage that says grace is received according to the openness of the receiver. If you're open this much, that's how much you're going to get. If you're open this much, that much, more and more and more. With these coaches, with these teammates, with this department, the more open they are, the more all in they are, the more they're going to get. What we're trying to unpack for you is just to show you the depth of thinking, the history, the intentionality that has gone into creating a shared culture based on the most fundamental Jesuit ideals. And we are clearly going after the highest aspirational goals. What we really find value in is that this can be monitored, measured, adapted, and continuously improved. We're never going to be perfect. We've made changes, we've made adjustments, we continue to grow again and again and again. This year will be no different. We need you as partners to help us to continue to challenge, to continue to drive this forward. I'm really from the bottom of my heart hoping that one weekend, in spite of any anxieties that you might have had, worries that you still have, that you're walking away with a sense of consolation, a sense of confidence that your son or daughter is here at Moyne. I get to see a lot of different places, working on strength and conditioning with culture, and I'm just incredibly bullish about what gets done in Moyne and with Moyne athletics. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Coach Evans, either for the final word or for a couple of questions.
Thank you, Matt. On behalf of everybody listening tonight, I'm sure every time I hear you, I always take something away, and knowing that we've always had you as a support person so close to home, you're definitely part of our family here at Moyne. Thank you again for everything tonight. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We will be putting this up on our website, so if anybody wants to look at the content again or share it with others that couldn't be here, that will be done. Thanks again for everything. We're wishing you the best here this term, and if there's anything we can do, please feel free to reach out, and go Dolphins. Thank you.